All right. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I apologize for the delay. I'd like to go ahead and get you started on being able to write an exponential equation for when you have a table, not just a graph, okay? One of the things I wanted to let you know is the first thing to look for is if you have a y-intercept or not. The y-intercept is going to be found when your x value equals 0. And if you look down here, I've got 0, 6 there. So when I'm looking for the y-intercept and it says that I am at 0, 6, that 6 is the important number I want right here, okay? Next, I need to be able to find the growth factor. I get to divide my y values, and I'm dividing by y2 by y1. What I mean by that is I'm finding two numbers that are immediately adjacent to each other on the x and the y here. Like, for example, 1 and 0. When I look at that, I see that these x's are immediately next to each other. 1 and 0 are next to each other. Also, these y values are right next to each other as well, as far as right next to each other on the graph, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say what is 18 divided by 6. The second value, the one that comes second, divided by the first value, the one that comes before. That happens to be 3. My growth factor is 3. And that's enough information for me to be able to write this equation here. All right? Y equals A times B raised to the X. A is our y-intercept, which is 6. Open parentheses, 3, because that's my growth factor, raised to the x. And that comes from this y value 6 being my y-intercept value here. And it comes from my growth factor, which is where I got my 8 divided by 6 being equal to 3. From there, and plugging it into my y equals abx equation that we've been working with for about a week and a half now, okay? So that's what we're looking at as far as being able to solve these. Now, I've got a couple of more examples that we're going to run through. You're going to see that the examples only slightly change. And that slight change depends on some of them having x equals 0 already on the table. Some of them where we have to do a little bit of extrapolation to be able to get what x0 is, okay? So when I look at this example here, I have, again, a table. And I'm looking for my y-intercept. I almost might put a star next time I see a y-intercept here. I see, oh, okay, 0 is my x and 0.5 is my y. So when I look at that and I say, okay, that's important to me, 0, 0.5, that's gonna be my y-intercept right there. Once again, I need to get that growth factor. I need to find that rate of change, okay? It is something that we still want to divide our y2 by our y1. That means I'm going to take my 1 and I'm going to divide it by 2. 1 divided by 2, all right? 1 divided by 2 happens to be 1/2 or 0.5. So that means I could write this either way, and you're going to need to be familiar enough to know that 0.5 and 1/2 are the same thing. Notice you would get 1/2 even if you did 2 divided by 4 or 4 divided by 8. Like if I was to grab my calculator and I was to type into that calculator what is 4 divided by 8. Give me a second here. Camera. A to get to calculate. There we go, delete that. If I do 4 divided by 8, it'll still give me 1/2. I could do the 2 divided by 4. I could do 0.5 divided by 1. That 0.5 can actually be converted into a fraction as well, all right? If I do 1 divided by 2, and I hit Control Enter, it would still give me the decimal of 0.5. So yes, it is something that is either going to be a fraction or a decimal. And we can kind of write this either way, depending on what the choices in the STAR test are. In this case, I'm going to have it written in as a fraction just because I feel like it is going to be a little bit more understandable as a fraction. And this is already enough information for us to be able to write our equation. Once again, we're going to start with our y equals. We're going to go with our y-intercept, which is our 0.5, times our 1/2, because that's our growth factor, raised to the x. And that is going to be our equation for this table here. It's the same thing over and over and over and over. All right, I need to find my y-intercept. Put a star next to your y-intercept, highlight your y-intercept, whatever it takes to do. We need our y to have a number where x is 0. I go, okay, I can write that. It is 0, 8. And once again, that y value there is my y-intercept. Hooray, it's 8. I already know that I can start my equation. Y equals 8 times. Okay, so that's already a hint that I can cross off some of the answers that are given to me on the star. Because believe it or not, if we look at some of these old star questions, I will show you real quick. I'll show you the 2021 version. Give me a second. There we go. Old star question. I don't have an x equals 0 here, but I'm noticing that this 36 and this 54 are next to each other. If I do, I don't like that one. Let's do that one. The table shows the value in dollars of a motorcycle at the end of X years. You'll notice X is 0 here. The 9,000 is here. When I start looking at these choices that are here, when X is 0, Y is 9,000, I can already cross off H and V. I only need to worry about V or G, or F or G, these two choices here. And even then, that's going to be easy to guess at because is the value going up or down? I see it decreasing. And so when I look at this, one of these will show us an increase or a decrease. Bigger than 1 is an increase, smaller than 1 is a decrease. So I can already tell you that G is the right answer just by looking at it. Writing this equation from this table like this is important because they may have you fill in the blank on it. And that goes even if we're looking at, here's another one from 2019. Oh, look, 018. I look and I go, oh, look, I can cross off C and A. So knowing what our 0 is and knowing that, oh, it's Y equals 18 first, B or D. And then from there, we can just ask ourselves what the fraction looks like when we divide, which is what we're going to do when we get back to our nearpod part. Once again, we're going to take our second y value and divide it by the first. We're going to take our 2 and divide it by 8. Okay? 2 divided by 8 is going to be, if you put it in your calculator, 1/4. Put the 1/4 here in the calculator, raise it to the x, and you're good. Same thing's going to happen on that example I was looking at just a moment ago on this screen. Notice I have 21.6 and 18. And if I take my calculator, turn on, and I do 21.6 divided by 18, it's going to give me 1.2. If I check my 1.2 and convert it into a fraction, ooh, wrong thing. I need to figure out how to put that in as a fraction. I'll tell you what the buttons are for converting it into a fraction later. When in doubt, though, you can say, oh, 1.2 is bigger than 1. That means that it has to be where 6/5, because 6 is bigger than 5. 6 has to be on top. That'll be a hint that B is the right answer, and it is. All right. You could also go back to your calculator and try with the 6 divided by 5, control enter when in doubt, and you'll still be able to get to the 1.2. Let's focus on the screen. There we go. All right. So I'm showing you that so you can see that, yes, this is a skill that is tested on the star, as well as it is something that is meant to be somewhat straightforward as long as you're able to recognize those steps, okay? So let's try this again here. Once again, we need to be able to find the y-intercept for this equation. Like that question I showed you just a couple of seconds ago, this doesn't have y equals 0 on there. In this case, you can't solve for the y-intercept first. We'll end up being able to solve for it, but first we have to solve for what our scale factor is, our growth factor. Notice those two numbers are still next to each other. I can still divide those. I grab my calculator and I say, what is 17.28 divided by 14.4? And that gives me 1.2. Sorry, spam. I hate spam. All right. That 1.2 is going to be my growth factor. And if I look carefully at that table that we were looking at over here, we'll notice that this is getting bigger. That means I'm multiplying by 1.2 as we go further down. In all honesty, if we want to go back up a couple of places, we can. Instead of multiplying by 1.2, we would divide by 1.2. So if I go back to my calculator and I go, what is 14.4 divided by 1.2, enter, it gives me 12, which I can then divide again by 1.2, and that gives me 10. The reason I do that twice is because you see how x is 2 right here? If I divide by 1.2 again, I'm stepping up to the 1. That's where 12 would be. If I step it up again by dividing by 1.2, that puts me at 0, which puts me at the number 10 here. I have to extrapolate a little bit like that. That puts me at 0, 10 as my y-intercept. The growth factor of the 1.2 that we just had, because when we divided, 17.28 divided by 14.4, it was 1.2. That gives us enough information for us to be able to write this in. Y equals 10, because yes, we had to solve for it, but that is our y-intercept. Open parentheses, 1.2. Close parentheses, raise it to the x. And again, if it happens to be a fraction, you can go, 1.2 is bigger than 1, and use some of your prior knowledge about fractions to know that anything that is a bigger number over a smaller number is bigger than 1 in order to be able to answer that question. This is the last example, and you'll notice right now, again, we don't have x equals 0. We want to get to that. If we step up once, we'll be at 2. If we step up again, we'll be at 1. If we step up again, we'll be at 0. So if we can find out what this rate is, this scale factor is, this growth factor, we can easily get this figured out. So let's start by finding that growth rate. How do we do that? We take 625 and divide it by the number right above it, 250. Okay, now I can't do that in my head. So I should get my calculator out. What am I doing? Calculator out and do 625 divided by 250, which is 5/2. Okay, I could even convert that into a decimal if I wanted to get 2.5. All right, so I know that everything is getting 2.5 bigger or smaller? Bigger or smaller? Okay, as we go up, I'm seeing it get bigger. That means I'm multiplying by that 2.5. All right? That means that if I want to go backwards, I'm going to need to divide by 2.5 a couple of times. How many times? 3. Why? Because if I'm at 3, dividing by 1 puts me at 2. Dividing by a second one puts me at 1. The third one puts me at 0. So I go, okay. If I take my 250 and divide it by 2.5, I take my 100 and divide it by 2.5. That's the second time. I take my 40 and divide it by 2.5. I get 16. Okay, so my y-intercept here is 16. Okay, 0, 16. That 16 is my y-intercept. I go to write my equation. Y equals 16 times. Again, you could do 2.5 or 5 over 2 raised to the x. That is going to be my equation for this. I'd like for y'all to go ahead and get started on your worksheet.